Species. Again, one of my favorite aspects of Honkai Star Rail and what I believe makes this game a cut above the rest in terms of lore. Because as trailblazers, we travel across the cosmos and meet a myriad of different people and experience a multitude of different varying cultures, each with their own in-depth histories and narratives that all build the world that we play in. And this is an aspect of the game that has yet to have its time in the spotlight until today. Because in this series, I talk about the 8 major species we've run into and break down their abilities, cultures, and pretty much whatever makes them special. In the last video, I talked about the humans and the Vidyadhara, and while that may sound simple, humans is a category. And in that category was humans, Abgens, Glomoth Iron Cavalry, Jinjo natives, and Onis. So if you missed it, you can just finish this one, then go watch that one. Because in this video, we will be going into uncharted territory, continuing this list with Intellitrons, Heliobi, Foxians and Borisin, mimetic entities, Helovians, and Pepeshis. An even taller order than the last. So let's get into this. Honkai Star Rail in-game species explained. Okay, so starting off hot here right out of the gate is the Intellitrons of the Mechanical Empire, or of today, Planet Screwlum. And in order to explain these guys, we gotta talk about someone that, if you've been around for a bit, you know this name all too well. None other than the final boss of racism, the creator of the anti-organic equation, the robot that started the empire of hatred known across the universe with nothing but a broken logic module and one working finger. Genius Society member number 27, Rubert 1. Yes, this menace is back, because you know how the Wing Weavers, Borisin, and Heliobi are denizens of the abundance? Well, the Intellitrons were denizens of Rubert 1. And who was Rubert 1? I'm so glad you asked. Because Rubert 1 was originally a broken robot dumped into a landfill that miraculously gained sentience. And with his newfound self-awareness, broken down engine, damaged logic unit, 90 gigabytes of RAM, single working arm, and single movable finger, this robot chose violence and instantly built a cannon. And yes, that's canon. Specifically, the disposable kinetic cannon that we have in game. He built this thing in 30 minutes, fired it, freed himself, and also damaged his logic unit even more. But he wasn't done, because in this first success, he saw his own potential and he continued by improving his computational power at such a rate that Noose themselves took notice and invited this future emperor to the Genius Society. And this was just the beginning, because as the vastness of his knowledge increased, so did his knowledge of other species. And through his calculations, he concluded that Intellitrons were precise, rigorous, and perfect, since their minds worked off of programming, and the flawed organic life forms paled in comparison. So he decided that the universe was better off without these flesh bags, assembled an army of intelligent mechanical life forms, crowned himself as emperor, and plunged half the known universe into the machine Emperor's War. A war in which countless civilizations were utterly annihilated and an entire galaxy, namely the Laurel Wreath Galaxy, was entirely wiped clean of all organic life. And their leader Aurelius was imprisoned and lethally poisoned in a humiliation ritual in the name of Rubert 1. And I gotta pause right here to let that sink in. Do you know how hateful a robot has to be to comprehend what humiliation and shame is, then implement it in executing the sovereign of a galaxy? Rubert was different. But Nova, you say, how did he topple a galaxy so fast? Well, allow me to explain. Because his hate was so strong that he found a way to refine it and made his racism more efficient. He turned it into an infective virus that not only indoctrinates mechanical life forms into his belief system, but also boosts their calculations of how to properly end organic life forms. He had it down to a science. And did I mention that it also worked on organic life forms? So they would end up brainwashed into thinking they are a robot and work for Rubert 1? It was wild, and no one could beat him. Long story short, it took the combination of the IPC, the Aeon of Equilibrium, and the Lord of Silence to take this one robot down, ending the first machine Emperor's War. The second wasn't nearly as bad as it was led by Rubert II, who ended up being a human thinking he was a robot and he was infected by the anti-organic equation, and somehow saw himself as Rubert. So yes, even though Rubert is gone, his equation is still out there and is still a problem. I tell all of you this because this is the history of the Intellitrons, and the ones we see today are mostly all former followers of Rubert I. And the IPC was so traumatized and scarred by the Machine Emperor's War that they plan to eliminate all inorganic life in retaliation. A reverse Rubert. And they were nearly gonna do it if it wasn't for the rise of a new Intellitron genius. A mechanical life form who always stood against Rubert I's hate-filled ideology. Genius Society member number 76, Screwlum. So in fear of ticking off another robo-genius, they gifted Screwlum a cuckoo clock as a symbol of peace. And this was a wise choice, because Screwy is the ruler of his own planet called Planet Screwlum, a mechanical planet full of mechanical life forms that refer to themselves as Screwlumites, replacing their corrupt past with a new directive of rationality, elegance, and optimism. But do not get it twisted. Each and nearly every single one of them possesses the remnants of the anti-organic equation, and robots do not age. They are just deciding not to kill. And while Screwlum does actively oppose Rubert's viewpoint, he is capable of violence, and threatened to go to war with Penacony once. That was a thing. Yeah, mess with Screwy and you get screwed up. So yeah, that's the Intellitrons, and that's your intro for how we do things around here if you're new. Intellitrons were villains, but not anymore. But speaking of bad guys, we have the Heliobi next. And if you guys think you know about Heliobi, you may just be in for some shock, because this history goes way back. Like, way back. Like, before the Xianzhou natives got the ambrosial arbor way back. You see, in a trek to claim the immortality that they would soon abhor, they came across these bluish-greenish fire flame creatures that could talk. And they proposed peace, and could make illusions and playful mirages, so the then very naive Xianzhou natives obliged, and frolicked with their newfound allies. However, they didn't know that their newfound allies were an undying race of parasitic hostility. These guys are shapeless balls of starfire essence and denizens of the abundance, though they are not loyal at all to Yaoshu. Their sole desire is to feed on the emotions of their host, hoping one day that it finds an imperishable vessel that it can just feed off of forever. This is why they like long-lived species. The ironic part is that they can't fuse well with Xianzhou natives, because remember that thing from the last video where the Xianzhou natives' bodies kind of reject transplants and stuff? Yeah, that kind of works on spiritual levels too. So it's harder for them to possess them in particular, but it's very possible. And once the possession has taken place, the Heliobus's goal is to feed off of the host's emotions. So they create illusions and manipulate their victim's nervous system in an effort to plague the mind of this poor soul into producing the emotions and stimuli that the Heliobus can feast upon. The host's experience is them feeling a second presence in their head that slowly fades, and they at some point can't tell the difference between that voice and their own. And as time passes, their body breaks down under the intense stress of the constant delusions the Heliobus tortures them with, until their body spontaneously combusts. Something that doesn't even require possession, by the way. Just by being in proximity to a Heliobus over a long span of time can cause this deterioration, because the Heliobus does this unconsciously. But that is far from the extent of their incredibly unique and volatile power. They can in fact fuse with each other to become even stronger, and in a fused state, it's kind of like a Megazord, each having their own specialty and performing their own tasks, with the strongest one being the leader, of course. And this is what makes them even more dangerous, because again, they are sentient balls of energy that cannot die and cannot be killed. And the more they fuse together, the stronger they get. The only positive being that they aren't generally very smart and don't really get along well with each other. They don't really have a personality at all either. They kind of just develop one based off of who they have possessed in the past. As a result, they don't have much of a culture. But the Xianzhou people are incredibly resourceful and found a way to detect, seal, and use them as a power source in many many different things. Like for example, the cursed swords that Yun Li hates so much. Those are Heliobi fused into swords that have killed so much that they simply corrupt whoever holds them. But that is nothing compared to the Shenzhou Juming's engines that have been and are currently fueled by the leader of the Heliobi, the Flint Emperor. And I'll let Fushuan tell that tale.
It is said that a living flame slumbers in the engine of the Juming. It is a creature the Xianzhou regarded as a great enemy in the old days. The Flint Emperor, who was also called the Primordial Flame. The craftsmen of the Juming used every means available to imprison it in the furnace, and used its power to forge various divine weapons.
So that's why the Juming forges the most powerful swords. But back to the Heliobi. As I've said before, they can fuse, but they can also split once defeated, and each fragment possesses a shard of the original's personality. I'm not gonna go into every war the Shenzhou has fought and defeated this undying threat, but one of the more notable Heliobus amalgamations was Ignamar, who was defeated by Jingyuan's predecessor Teng Xiao, and split into many shards, one of which is Mr. Tail, of course, that Cirrus attempted to collect in his, her, their revenge plot, only to be aura-maxed into submission by the lightning-wielding, thunder-clapping, spirit-squashing, hash-slinging slasher. But Cirrus is far from the most powerful Heliobus. That would either be the Flint Emperor or our favorite unlicensed chiropractor. Because Phantilia is a Lord Ravager and emanator of destruction. And though she is by far the weakest of the Lord Ravagers we know about, she is still very much a threat. Capable of destroying a person's body and soul that, even if miraculously restored, leaves irreparably painful scars. As a Heliobus herself, she is still in essence a ball of energy, but she is so strong that she can possess and copy a body, leaving the host on the brink of death, allowing her to masquerade as the person in the process. Because she still seems to require the host to be alive in order to do her thing, and she also has grown to sadistically enjoy the demise of her hosts. Her favorite type of destruction being internal and self-destruction. Also, as a denizen of abundance, she also has some affinity for the abundance's power, even as a Lord Ravager. Because this body we fight her in was created with the power of the Ambrosial Arbor. She just needed to access its roots. So she is one of the only two beings we have ever seen command the power of two different paths at once, even though paths aren't supposed to be able to do that. The other being Herta, but you know, Herta's kind of the GOAT, so it's whatever. That's a topic for a different video. Fun fact, Ting Yun uses Heliobi Starfire Essence to level herself, and I think that's her own little get back against Phantilia. Also, with all of this in mind, don't you have just a little bit more respect for Tail? He holds himself back so much in order to not harm Hua Hua, and even endures being sealed as a protective measure. Also, if you're wondering why Hua Hua is abundance, that's why. Heliobi are denizens of abundance, and so are Foxians in a weird way. I'll talk about that later, because that is a wonderful segue into our next species, of which I am going to cover as a duo, the Foxians and the Borisins. And this is going to get wild. I'm sure you guys have heard that these two share a common ancestor, and this is true, but did you know that they also shared a planet? This planet was called Verdantia, and it was the planet of Verdant, with the Foxians inhabiting the riverlands and the Borisin living in the grasslands, and the two would cooperate during one season, then make war in the next. The Vulpus summer was peacetime because of the harvest and the abundance of food, and the Lupus winter was wartime due to food scarcity. The Borisins saw the Foxians as deceptive, shrewd merchants, and the Foxians saw the Borisins as savages. Very similar to how they are now. So they didn't get along too well, but they kind of coexisted in a toxic relationship. But at some point, one Lupus winter was especially long and brutal, causing mass starvation. And in a fit of desperation, a prophet known by the Foxians as Lady Tushan, and by Borisin a man named Duran, cried out to the cosmos, and of course, Yaoshi answered, and split the mountains, creating a river of nectar known as the Red Spring. And those who drank from the river gained largely increased vitality and strength. But of course, with Yaoshi, there is always a catch, because the bounty of the Red Spring led to a remarkable rise in the population on Verdantia and then triggered an ecological collapse. So both Foxians and Borisins had to abandon their beloved homeworld, to which the Borisins sought to bring the wartime of the lupus winter to the stars. Generally, Foxians are known for their speed, dexterity, and wit, while Borisin are known for their strength, bestial mutations, and adaptability. But after looking into them a bit deeper, they are both much more alike, and they are two sides of the same coin. Let me explain. Foxians are more intelligent and excellent starskiff pilots, and Borisin have mastered biotechnology and found ways of modifying their own bodies as well as creating spaceships, weapons, and armor. So both are very much intelligent. Borisin also have a healing factor that far outshines even that of the Xianzhou natives, but Foxians also possess stem cells that sustain them for around 300 years without aging a day past adulthood. They also kind of dodge out on the whole Marstruck thing because they don't live long enough. So they're both very smart, but Foxians are smarter, they both have healing factors, but the Borisins are way stronger. So think of it this way. Put simply, the Foxians are less extreme, more palatable versions of the Borisin. The only major difference where they do not share the same abilities is Moon Rage, where it only strengthens the Borisin, giving them the ability to shapeshift, but it destroys the sanity of Foxians. Mainly because the healing factor that the Borisins have kind of counteract the damage Moon Rage does to the body. But don't get me wrong, it strengthens the Foxians too, but they just turn into mindless beasts at that point. And it kind of just tears their body apart. It's also very rare for Foxians to even be capable of having Moon Rage, which brings me to the Xianzhou Yao Qing's Foxians, because they in particular are more genetically close to the Borisin than the normal Foxians are. And because of this, they have a higher chance of having Moon Rage. The reason why this is because the Xianzhou Yao Qing's Verdant Knights often rescue Foxians from Borisin-ruled worlds where they are kept as slaves. An example of these rescued slaves would be Fei Xiao, or Saran as her name was back then. And she is part Borisin, the same clan as Hule. And I don't think I can even explain why that is on YouTube, because I think you can imagine what happened. This also explains why she doesn't have a tail, since some Borisin have tails and others either don't, or it's too small to really see. But on the bright side, this could also be why she escaped unscathed, because in many cases the Borisin dig out the eyes of their slaves to keep them from learning things. And yes, that cruelty is a transition into talking about their culture, because the Borisin have a very unique way of growing up. You see, when the children reach a certain age, the voodoo masters of the Borisin tribe give bridles to the children, and the bridles serve as their living book, as they call it, which pretty much tells the tales of their lives and accomplishments. You know, the more stuff they kill and conquer, the more weathered the bridle becomes and the more respect they get. Kind of like notches on a belt indicating kills. And trust me, they start early with a trial by fire, because the day they reach adulthood, they have to tame a mecha beast. And this is where things get crazy. A mecha beast is a genetically modified witchcraft abomination that is somehow a living biological spaceship. Yes, I can't believe it either. It is a horrific thing with fangs, tentacles, and up to 10 brains. And if you cut one of them off, it can spawn another beast ship. They eat people for fuel, fly through space, and somehow can reproduce. And all of the young Borisin adults have to subdue that. Each. And if they die, they are seen as cowards. What? Precisely. Dying to whatever that thing is considered cowardice. And you know what the crazy part is? The Foxians have them too. Starskiffs aren't built, they are grown from seeds. Spaceships are grown from seeds and bred, apparently. Go figure. I feel like I'm losing my mind reading this stuff. Who else knows this? Why do the spaceships have lore? Anyway, mental breakdown aside, the Foxians have their own little thing that they do for kids to choose a profession called birth fates, where they set out a bunch of toys and things, and whatever the baby picks up will be their future occupation. You know, baby picks up sword, he'll be a warrior. If little girl picks up jade abacus, she'll be a diviner. Again, much more palatable than what the Borisin do. And for adulthood, they have the hairpin ceremony, though it's not exactly stated what this entails, but if I had to guess, it's probably something to do with a starskiff, because, you know, they have to match up with the Borisin. And besides going massively into their biology, like how the Foxians' livers are different from the Borisin, and if a Borisin's liver is removed, they turn into this cancerous mass. That is the Foxians and the Borisins. things. This video is probably one of my longest, but I like to be thorough, and you know I do not do things the easy way on this channel. So we're gonna need a part 3. I hope you guys are still enjoying this series so far because you guys love the first one, and I love to yap about lore. So I'll probably post a poll to see what you guys want next because I am behind schedule and Emphoria story dropped and we have so much to talk about and I can't wait. You take a week break and all order flies out the window. But you know what? Double link video. We are so back. What do you guys think? Be sure to let me know and I'll see you all in the next video. Peace, y'all.